Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. What? Fly? No, haven't you heard? Flying is dangerous. Haven't you been on social media? Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, Telegram, Billygram? No. No flying for me. Straight here on terra firma. Rubber meets the road. This is the way to travel. Seriously, you haven't heard? Oh, well. It's bad. Oh, what are you waiting for? Buckle up.
So having an aviation YouTube channel, the number one question I get from a lot of people, especially recently, is Maximus. Flying is so dangerous anymore. Haven't you noticed that? Why is that? And it's hard to argue. I mean, especially if you consider just the past few months alone. If we go back to 2024, Christmas Day, the Azerbaijan airline was shot down, and that was done in front of cameras and smartphones and posted instantly on social media. And then just 2 days later in South Korea, Jeju, well, there was that devastating crash when all on board perished when during the crash landing, the 727 hit into a brick reinforced bunker, which was at the end of the runway for some reason. Then January, we had the mid-air collision of the CRJ and the Black Hawk helicopter, followed by Philadelphia and the air ambulance crash, and it culminating recently in a tragic tour crash in New York.
And if all that wasn't bad enough, that doesn't take into account all of the general aviation accidents that have taken place in that same time period. So when you ask me if flying is more dangerous or has become more dangerous, I have to say, yes, it is not more dangerous than before. See what I did there with the not? Because you thought I was going to say, yeah, well, anyway. So the answer is no, there are not more plane crashes than ever before. However, what we do have more of than ever before are these things. Smartphones. And along with the smartphones, I don't know, 7, 10, 20 billion of them, we also have an application for each one, which we call social media. Anyway, we have the ability now to instantaneously cover not only plane crashes, but disasters of any type, and flood social media with these stories, allowing many more people who wouldn't normally be able to see these stories to see them. And so after having said all that, I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is we don't have an aviation safety problem as those on social media would have you believe. The bad news is we have a problem, and it's a big problem. It's a Baader-Meinhof problem.
In 1994, a man named Terry Mullen saw a small news blurb about a small Red Army faction terrorist group in Germany called the Baader-Meinhof Gang. Now, Terry had never heard of this group before. However, not once but twice in 24 hours, he came across 2 separate news stories about the group. He found it so strange that he even wrote about it. The Baader-Meinhof Gang, its founders include Andreas Baader and Ulrich Meinhof. But Baader-Meinhof is really irrelevant to the theory. It could have easily been Bonnie or Clyde or cookies and milk. It wasn't apropos of anything. It was just a trigger in Mullen's mind. So Mullins wrote to a Minnesota newspaper in 1994 after having himself referenced the group, only to see that very same group in the newspaper the following day. However, Mullen found this odd because this guerrilla group hadn't been in the U.S. news for years. Okay, so that's the background for the origin of the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. Okay, so then how does this phenomenon relate to the subject of aviation safety in 2025? Well, the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, also known as the frequency illusion, is a cognitive bias, where something you recently learned or noticed seems to appear everywhere, leading to the perception that it's more common than it actually is. This happens because your brain's attention is focused on the new information, making you more likely to notice it in the future. This so-called recency illusion is a cognitive bias where individuals can overestimate the importance or the recentness of a phenomenon they have recently witnessed. It is essentially a tendency to believe something originated only recently, simply because it was recently noticed. This can lead to misinterpretations and biases in judgment. People believe that something is new or more significant simply because they've just noticed it recently. It's a selective memory mechanism where we focus on the most recent information and may ignore or underemphasize earlier events. So the recency illusion can lead to inaccurate assessments, flawed decisions, and even overestimation of the impact of recent changes or events, such as in our case today, referring to the frequency of airplane crashes. So with that understanding, let's look at the actual facts of aviation safety over the last 40 years. Since 1990, the safety of air travel in the U.S. has undergone a dramatic transformation, turning what was once a risk-laden industry into one of the safest forms of transportation in the world. And this shift is just not anecdotal. It's backed by hard data. Just in 1990 alone, there were 39 total fatal commercial aviation accidents in the U.S., resulting in over 800 deaths. By contrast, in the last full year of available data, 2023, this of course before the recent crashes in the news we talked about, the NTSB recorded 0 fatal crashes involving major U.S. commercial airlines. However, this long zero fatality safety record wasn't a statistical fluke, but rather the product of decades of systematic improvements, regulatory reform, and technological innovation. And speaking of safe, listen to this. One of the most telling metrics is the fatal accident rate per million departures. In 1990, this rate was approximately 0.89 for scheduled commercial flights. So in essence, 0.89 per million translates to about 890 passenger deaths out of every million passengers. Yeah, talk about the dark ages of aviation. However, by 2023, that number had dropped to less than 0.1 per million, and that translates to just 1 in 100 million deaths. Wow, think about that. Just 1 in 100 million. That's an astonishing 98% improvement. The private aviation sector also saw similar decreases in fatal accidents. And so from a public confidence standpoint, and yes, including the recent crashes, air travel has never been safer in history. Statistically, a passenger flying on a U.S. commercial airline today is over 60 times less likely to die in a crash than in 1990. The story of American aviation since then isn't just one of progress, it's one of near miraculous transformation, propelled by data, vigilance, and a relentless commitment to learn from every mistake. And it may not seem like that all the time, but that's still the case. And that last sentence is the key. Every life ever lost in a plane crash isn't taken for granted. Each and every one of them have been pieces of the complex aviation safety puzzle that created the picture of safety we have today. And you can include in that the data and learning of the 2 MAX crashes in 2018 and 2019. As well as all the recent disasters we've seen in the news lately. Many of you are going to be saying, come on, Maximus, flying is definitely more dangerous than it's ever been. Look around you. It's everywhere. It's on social media. It must be true. Well, put it this way. If you were born in a cave and you spent your life in a cave, say 25, 27, 30 years, however old you may be, and after that time, all you've known is darkness, and it was dark forever. But suddenly, one day, crack in the dome of your cave appeared, and a sliver of, well, you don't know what it is yet, but we know it as light, came through, and then you felt the warmth. And then the crack got bigger, and more light and more warmth came in. Well, what would you think? You'd be terrified. You'd say, oh my God, what is this? The world is ending. I've never seen such a thing before. This has never been part of my life. Meanwhile, we all know it as the sun, and the sun has been hanging in the sky, basically our life source, for billions and billions of years. And it's always been there. It's just that you've never seen it. And now that you see it, you think it must be odd, or it must be something doom and gloom. But it's just the sun doing what the sun does. But the fact that you've been exposed to it, well, now you know about it. And the same thing is about aviation safety and plane crashes and those kind of things.
So before social media and cable news, if there was a plane crash in Des Moines, Iowa, or even Oklahoma or some small town, you never heard about it. It was just like local news for that town. But after cable news came along, and especially social media and the internet, well, you needed clicks. You needed 24/7 news cycle. You needed stories. And suddenly, every little puddle jumper plane crash around the country. It was front page news. It was viral. It was spread around. Suddenly it seemed like planes were falling out of the sky everywhere, when they really hadn't gotten any worse, but they had gotten progressively better, as the evidence shows, much better, much safer. Back then, you didn't think about it. But now, with the generation coming up, which has been so fortunate that they've had nothing but really the safest time in aviation ever, that when they start to see planes fall from the sky, it's like that, ray of light cracking through your dark cave. It's new, it's odd. So you can understand the propensity of people who aren't used to such tragedies, who are used to really a nice, safe aviation system, well, think the sky is falling. And to them it is. But in all actuality, it is just much safer than it's ever been. It's just that Baader-Meinhof effect again. So when things seem like they're happening all at once for no particular reason, it's not always what you think it is. And in this case, aviation safety is safer than it's ever been. Statistics prove that out. However, there are more phones and social media and cameras, and there's more of those as there have ever been. And everybody has a need to produce content for clicks, and the more shocking the content, the more the algorithm wants to find it. So sure, flying can be dangerous at times, but it is still the safest form of transportation, believe it or not. And I know if you're afraid to fly, that's not very comforting, but that's a fact. So the next time you're at the beach and you see a guy wearing the same pair of Speedos you're wearing, or somebody's driving the same car you're driving, it's not suddenly that everybody's into it. It's just that you're just seeing it for the first time. And that is the Baader-Meinhof effect in principle. And with that, on the way out, I'm going to leave you with another plane coming in behind me from where I am. Let me know down below. Until next time, this is Max.